All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Just want to verify that you all can hear me okay. So somebody could just respond in chat and say, yes, I can hear you. All right, so good that everyone can hear me. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And before we get too far into any content or anything like that, I just kind of want to share with you the impetus behind this, why I'm doing it, and who it's more likely to benefit. In other words, who I had in mind when I decided to do this project. And this is something that I plan to do once a month, and hopefully all of you will go along on that ride with me. But the purpose is when I became, when I got into doing cybersecurity some years ago, maybe close to 20 years ago. One of the things that happened is I was very intimidated because when I would go and listen to presentations and things like that, I felt like people were talking over my head. I didn't understand 90% of what I was hearing at these conferences and things like that. And even when I would sit down with coworkers who were supposed to be, teaching me how to do whatever it was, I still felt like 90% of what that person just went over with me, I had no clue what they were talking about. And you all know the routine. You grin and nod, and you don't want to say that you don't get it all, and you end up in a situation. So what ended up happening was I decided to dig into it, and I said, let me just see what's going on. And I started going to conferences, listening to people speak and things like that. And once I really put it in a format that I can understand and started with the absolute basics, a lot more things started to click for me. And on top of that, it wasn't long before I realized that these things weren't that complicated, and I didn't come from a traditional IT or cybersecurity background. I didn't have a computer science degree or any of that stuff when I got into the industry. And I didn't come from the typical demographic either, of people that do security engineering or computer engineering. I come from, I grew up below poverty. And I felt like, just looking around the industry, with the big issue of there being such a huge shortage of talent in the industry. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact that everybody that's hiring and looking for the talent are looking for people in that one demographic and with that one educational background. And I strongly believe that since I came into the industry without any really technical background whatsoever, and I can confidently and comfortably say that I believe I've had successes in this industry that most don't. And I was able to do that while coming from a non-traditional, non-computer science background. And I believe that, in the world, there are millions of people like myself and like some of you that didn't come from that background. You come from a different place, you don't have different exposures. But I believe you can really kill it, in this industry if you're giving the information in a way that's conducive for you to absorb it. Even when you look at things like, I'm not going to get into naming specific certifications and things like that, but a lot of even the entry level certifications, when you actually sit and look at the material, it's not really entry level for people that have no background. It's entry level for people that already have some type of technical background. Um, so in other words, you jump into one of these courses to get a certification that's an entry level security cert. And within 5 minutes, you're already lost because you've heard 20 terms that make absolutely no sense to you, right? So I'm trying to bridge that gap. This is a movement. This is a project that I plan to carry on for multiple years. We have some big things in store for it as well, as far as how we're going to, get this to the world and not just the small group that we have here. And by the way, you all are going to be part of history because this is the first session of many, and you will go down in history as being part of this first session because we do have every bit of confidence that this is going to turn into a big thing because we're catering to you know a group. And when I say a group, I'm not basing that on race or anything like that. I'm simply saying people that don't have a computer science background, people that don't have a technical background, that are just interested in changing careers or doing cybersecurity. That is who this is for. Now, with me laying that out and saying that's who it's for, that is not the only people that can benefit from it. Okay. So, for those of you that have some experience, you have some background, yeah, you're going to find some of these things that we're going to go over today to be extremely basic for you. But remember, who I'm creating this for is not for you if you already have a background. But even as an expert myself, sometimes I have to go back into the weeds and get some foundational stuff because you forget these things if you don't do it every day. And the most complex incident response cases that I've ever worked on, even some stuff that I was working on last week, a lot of the basic Linux command line stuff and Windows command line stuff is what I had to revert back to get the information that we needed from what that malware was doing and how it was propagating and moving internally. All right. So that is what the process is. And hopefully, all of you that's in here right now, there's 26 of you. Hopefully, everybody that joins this, a year from now, I will have you on a very large stage giving a testimonial about this amazing job that you've got as a result of going through this session, that we're doing here. That is my goal. That is what I hope. And I've kind of known for a lot of years that I believe the reason I was put on this earth is to do this type of thing, relay this information to people that wouldn't normally get it. Part of my successes, and I've got a few clients on here as well that I do pen testing and incident response and things like that for that are just tuning in. But they can vouch and tell you that part of my success is being able to get in the weeds and do the exercises, do the threat hunting, do the pen testing, do the incident response, but also at the same time massage that information into a format that executives that have no technical experience can easily understand what we did, how we did it, what we found, and what the recommendations are at a very high level. And that is what gives you success in a lot of industries, not just this one. So, that is what I'm trying to do is I want to kind of lay out the blueprint of like, look, this is how I did it. Like maybe the first year I went to Black Hat, I was completely overwhelmed. By the third year, for some of the presentations, I was kind of like, oh, is this what y'all doing? Like, that's it? Like for real? That's impressive. And, that's kind of when I knew that I had broken through that ceiling. I'd figured out like, what the little tricks and things like that were. A lot of these people in the industry will write you a whole dissertation and use 1,000 big words to explain something that could simply be explained with, oh, all you need to do is flick that light switch on and it turns a light on. I could just tell you, go over there and turn on that light. I could give you a very complex way of saying, use your quad and your delts and whatever to get up and go over and apply this much pressure to your delts to lift your arm so that you can turn on the light, right? We could say that, or we could just say, go over there, use your hand to flick that switch up and it'll turn on the light. And I found that there's a lot less of that going on and a lot more of the more extreme method of trying to make things more complex than it is. So that is why we're here. I want to make this information consumable for those of you that don't have a strong cyber or strong technical background. Yes, so let's jump right into it. Now, so as a bonus, this is not something that I publicly released, but I'm going to say this now to you all. As a bonus, The last hour today, what we're going to do is I'm going to fire up a Zoom meeting, and I'm going to let you all, if you choose, join in that Zoom meeting. And then you can actually talk to me directly, ask me direct questions. That's all going to be recorded too. So just know that if you jump on there, the stuff that you're asking is going to be recorded, because again, the whole purpose of this is to make this information consumable and accessible to everyone. Doesn't, because the thing that I found out, being, some of you know that partially how I got to where I am is through one of the companies that I'm partnering with. It's actually providing us a lab environment for today, and that's InfoSec Institute. I mean, you can't really say Keatron Evans and cybersecurity without saying InfoSec Institute, and you really can't say InfoSec Institute, cybersecurity training, or InfoSec Institute pen testing without saying Keatron Evans. So we're kind of bound at the hip in that regard, and we've been that way for a really long time. But one of the things I realized in teaching those courses, for pen testing and things like that, is if I were to go back to myself when I was coming right out of high school, I would in no way even come close to being able to afford the classes that I teach now that people come and pay for. And keep in mind, a lot of these classes are paid for by companies or people that are making big salaries. But you all know the reason you're here, you all know the conundrum. If you're not in a job where you're already making a lot of money, you can't afford these, some of my classes, right? You just can't afford it. But you need these classes to get the training to get that job, or to get the skills to get that job. So this is another reason I'm here, is to try to bridge that gap. If you got no money, fine. Everything we're going to give you here is free. Now, also the InfoSec skills environment, it's extremely, extremely affordable. I mean, you're talking, $600 a year to have access to over 1,200 courses, and we'll talk about that. But for the amount of time that you're here with me, if you stick with me every month, I'm going to stick with you every month, and you really won't need to do anything outside of tuning into these 4-hour sessions once a month on a Saturday, and all of the information that you need to get you to that level, to where you can comfortably go through these things. I'm going to get you there. So let's talk a little bit here. And yes, like I said, we are going to do a Zoom meeting at the end. The last hour, the question and answer session is going to be basically live recorded Zoom. So you can actually talk to me directly, ask me questions directly. And, one of the things I've learned about training is some of the best learning comes from other people's questions. So some of the questions that you all are going to have for me, those questions are going to be what makes this information more consumable to other people that are going to watch the stream at a later point. And that's my thought process behind it. All right. So let me get started here with we're going to do a little screen sharing. All right, so we got our screen share going there. So one thing I want everybody to do is go to the InfoSec skills site here, because if you want to participate in the hands-on, you're going to need to actually get yourself a free skills account. So you basically go here. I'm about to give you a code that you can use. It's going to give you 30 free days for those of you that didn't get it already. All right. So now you can opt to do one or two things. You can use my code that will give it to you for 30 days free, or you could use the 7-day free trial for today, right? Because it's for 7 days. And then you can use my code after this, because that way you get 37 free days, right? Instead of 30 days. So you can click on 7-day free trial, put in your information here, all right? And you're going to do yearly with the free trial, or you can just do free trial, monthly with free trial, whichever one of these options you want. But either way, it's not going to charge you anything initially. So you put in your information, put in another email. That one works. So you put your info in there, and then you continue. And I just have to use it, find an email address I haven't used a demo this with already. All right, so it takes you to this page right here. Now, this is where you could put in that coupon code of mine, and it'll give you 30 days free. So the coupon code is, let me just pull it back up here, make sure I get it right. Pretty sure it's my name, all caps, Keatron intro 2022. Let me just get it in the email here. Sorry, it's intro 22, no 20, it's 22 like that. And that code will give you, access. Now, you don't need to, we're not going to charge you a credit card fee or anything like that. And this is not a real credit card number, by the way. So once you put that information in, like I said, this is not a real number because I'm not going to, put a real credit card in a public recording here. You put your credit card info in there, put the coupon in, and then it'll give you that free 30 days. And of course, you can just cancel it, if you don't need to use it after that. But if you're all here with me, afterwards, you will be able to, after this week, you'll be able to go through that. So that's how you want to approach that. So I'm going to give everybody about 5 minutes or so to get themselves a code, get yourselves an account set up there. And then after you get that account set up, we're going to jump right into getting some stuff started off here. And I'm just going to go into my account, log into it, and I'll just wait for you all to get yours set up. And then once you get an account set up, I'll tell you where we're going to be going to. And to speed things up and to help out, what you all can do is once you get your account set up, just put a message in, put a chat message in that says you're done or you got your account set up. That way I'm not rushing ahead too much, leaving too many people behind. And let me know if everybody's still hearing me okay and you're seeing my shared screen okay. Just when you get a chance, just say hear you and see you fine in chat, if somebody can do that. So if you already have an account, you don't need to set up a new one. You can just use the account that you have. If you already have an account, that's awesome. Thank you, Strawberry. That's exactly the point of doing this is Being a veteran in this industry and been doing this for the last nearly 20 years, even training for the last nearly 20 years, um, there's a missing manual for people to go from zero to get into the industry. All the entry level stuff out there is not truly entry level. So we're going to, part of this movement is to try to address some of that. Hello, new format. Good to see you, Saif, my friend. Good to see you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Awesome on those of you that are getting set up there. Let me pause the video for a sec to get my power strip. Video's back now. So when you set up the account, when it gets to the page where the credit card is, under that there's a coupon code field. That's where the coupon code goes. All right. So does anybody need me to hold off before going into the account here? Has everybody got their account set up? If you need me to hold off, just let me know. Yeah, that credit card number thing there, they're not going to charge you except if you plan to keep the account more than 30 days, which you don't need to keep it more than 30 days because this is just one day here. All right. So the other thing too is if you already have an account, you don't need to worry about it. If you already got an account, just log in with that. So for those of you that if you are falling behind on getting it set up, that's fine. Remember, this is being recorded, so it'll be available to you. It'll be, it'll show up here. I'll have it, as a live recording on YouTube, and I'll make it available permanently. And make sure you all subscribe to the channel and let other people know to subscribe. So what we're going to start off is, once you get into your account, you should have a page that looks something like this. It'll be a dashboard. It might look a little different than mine because I've got all kinds of stuff going on with mine. But at the top, it should look the same. And you want to go to Learn and go to Cyber Ranges. And under Cyber Ranges, we're going to go to Penetration Testing. Now, I'm not trying to teach you to be a pen tester today, but the environment that this range is made up of is what we need to be looking at today. So I'll let everybody get to this point. So KE for RIP, if you've already got an account, you don't need to worry about entering a coupon code. So if you already got an account, just log into that account. What will end up happening is, once the account duration that you have expires, then you can go back and use the coupon code. All right. So while we're waiting for people to catch up here, let me just talk about what we're going to be doing in this little environment here to get people over the fear of Linux and the command line. And, next time we do this, we'll spend a lot of time on the Windows command line as well. But here's one of the issues I've seen. Like, I've done what I'm doing for you all now. I've done this one-on-one for people as well. And part of me doing that was to help those people, most important thing. The secondary too is to get some data, to get some information about what the learning process is for those that don't have a background in technology, what your major challenges are, and things like that. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've gotten quite a collection of data around that. And one of the things I see happen commonly, one of the big mistakes I see people making, is trying to go too fast. Okay? Trying to go too fast. You go through these exercises, you go through these labs, you go through these cyber ranges, you go to Try Acme and all these places, and you get through these exercises quickly, and then you get to the end, you're like, I did it, I made it, I can do that thing now. But let me give you some hard truth here, some things that sometimes tough to hear. Just because you've done something once does not mean you've mastered it. It does not mean that you can do it consistently again. I can tell you several situations where I've learned how to do things, and then I get there to do those things, not pen test plus, just pen test, and I can't remember what I did that first time I did it. So just because you learn how to do, because you went through the process of doing something one time, it does not mean that you have mastered whatever that thing is. So for those asking how to get to the range, let me just go back out. It's going to be Learn. Like, click at the top here to Learn. Cyber Ranges, not Pen Test Plus, but penetration testing is the range that you will go into. And I'll put that in chat as well, so you'll have like a written record of it. All right. So once we are in here, once you're in this particular lab environment, what we're going to do is you're going to go into the Linux fundamentals. Now, this lab normally, when I teach the pen testing course, we normally set aside about 25 to 30 minutes for this lab. We're going to spend about an hour in it because we're going to actually dig into each step, and I'm going to explain to you what's going on and give you context around it. In other words, you will understand why and how you're learning, why you're learning these things and how it's applied to a real world situation. So I'll give everybody just a moment to get into that first Linux fundamentals exercise, and just let me know in chat when you've made it there. And I'll try to transpose the key instructions to the chat here on YouTube so that you can, follow along in chat if I'm going. You're not able to keep up with me talking through it. I will be giving you all breaks, about every hour. I'll give you like a 5 or 10 minute break to water, coffee, bathroom, whatever it is you need to do. All right, so I'm gonna kind of go through this a little bit here, and you can keep up. So the very first thing that we jump into here is using the ls command in Linux. Now, one of the things that's the biggest challenge for people that are new to Linux and new to the command line is just knowing where you are, getting into the comfort zone of being able to understand where you are. What the ls command is it's a way for you to find out exactly where you are and what's in the place that you are. So if we're in a specific directory, then we want to know what else is in that directory. So if we enter the ls command, and by the way, we have several generations of this cyber rank here. And for this particular exercise, we're doing the first generation. Some later stuff, we're going to do the latest generation, the last generation of it, the brand new stuff that we got. So when you enter this command, a couple of things it does, it gives you the green thumb to let you know you did it right. But more importantly, you can see the results. We're able to see all the files that are in this directory. All right. And we just click next on the green arrow. And then it introduces you to something called switches. And this is something that's very challenging and confusing for people that are new to the command line, because when you see us doing these demonstrations of pen testing and stuff like that, a lot of what you see is we're doing a lot of commands with a lot of flags. And we're just going through these flags and dropping them in there really fast. And that seems overwhelming to some of you. But what it is it's just that, for one, a lot of the flags that you see us use are transferable across different commands. So, certain flags work for different commands, do different things. Also, we've done what you're doing now and sit down and taken the time to practice what these commands are. So what we're doing is we're adding 2 flags here. This is not 1 flag, this is 2. So the way I want you to think of this is, instead of us saying ls-la, think of it as we're us doing ls-l and then separately -a, because we're invoking 2 different switches or flags here. And the switches that we're bringing in is the -l which gives us long format, and the -A, which shows us all files. So let me deal with the A first. And you don't have to do this if you don't want, but I need to show you this. So if I add the -A flag, all right, I want you to see the difference. If we just do ls, we see that. Okay. If I add the -A, notice there appears to be more things. The first difference you'll notice if you look closely is when we just do ls, we don't see any files or folders that begin with a dot. But if you look down here with the -A, suddenly it revealed, hey, there's some stuff in here that starts with dot. Now, let me explain to you what that means in the world of Linux. In Linux, files that are hidden start with a dot. Yes, there's caveats. Yes, there's exceptions. Don't even worry about those right now. Just believe blindly for right now that in Linux, files that are hidden begin with a dot. And if you have the permissions, if you want to see those hidden files, just give your ls command the -A flag, and it will show you the things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see, like all these files and folders that begin with a dot. So that's what -A gives you. Now let's see what -L gives us. Okay. If I clear my screen, this is something you'll get used to as well. I'm just going to type CLEAR. That takes me back to the top. If I enter a -L, notice it does more than just show me the files that are there, but it also shows me the permissions. These over here are all the permissions that are associated, and we'll talk about what those all mean in a much later session. It shows us the ownership of the files. It shows us the size of the files, creation time, and the actual file name itself. Now, if I wanted to see all this detailed information, plus make sure I see it for hidden files as well, then I could combine the -L and the -A like so. Or Linux is okay with me doing it this way, or I can just do this. And it knows that I mean the same thing. It's able to interpret that I mean to do those two separate switches like that when I put them together. So since there is with YouTube Live, there's like a little bit of like a 10-second delay. I'm going to stop and let you all catch up, and I'll go view the comments to see if anyone's got questions. Linux is definitely case sensitive. And what I'm going to do is on the screen, I'm going to run history. You'll learn about this command later. And you can see all the commands that I've entered thus far. So if you want to just take a few minutes to sit and go through these and just think about and absorb what I said about the flags, the switches, you can go ahead. Here's a list of all the commands I've entered so far. Now I am going to be doing kind of like a little bit of a pen test type demonstration here within the next hour, because once we go through some of these commands, I want to show you that even when you get to something as complex as pen testing, you're still going to be using these switches. You're still going to be using these commands. So these things are like the glue that holds together the more complex stuff that we do in pen testing. You're never really going to get away from, having to know these basics. Now, once everyone had a chance to run these commands and you got to work right, go ahead if you can and just start letting me know in chat, and we'll move on to PWD. Now, some of you probably figured out you can only send messages if you subscribe to the channel. All right, looks like enough of you have gotten through this. So we're going to get ready to move on to the next command, which is PWD. The 30-day code is, I'm putting that in chat now. All right, now, the next thing is PWD, and PWD is short for print working directory. And what this is it shows you where you currently are. All right, remember, LS shows us what's there, you know, wherever I am, what's around me. All right, I see what's around me. Now, where am I exactly? And this would be the equivalent to what you do if you would just drop into a place, right? First thing is what's around me so I don't stumble and break my neck. And the second thing is where am I at, you know? And we can find it out just by entering PWD, which is short for print working directory. And it shows us that our current directory is home admin. Now, something that's important to note here about Linux that may not be apparent, okay? When you see that directory with just a leading / there, it means that that's off of root relative to root, okay? So from root, you could just do cd home admin, and it will take you to this specific directory here, right? So that's what that / means right there. Now you could there's other shortcuts to get there, but you know I don't want to muddy the waters with that just yet. But that's print working directory. So anytime you're in any Linux distribution, as a matter of fact, let me just pull up another one here and show you. And you all don't need to try to go on your machine and do this. I'm just using a more real world type solution here. showing you some of the stuff that we use in actual engagements. Right, so this is a very old Linux distro called Ubuntu. Right, so if I were to do PWD here, this version of Linux knows what it means. If I go to a more updated version of this, let's go to Debian here. So I'm in a Debian distro here. Guess what? PWD still works, right? So across most Linux distributions, the commands that you're going to learn today will work across all of them. And the point of me approaching it this way is, let's say you decide you want to explore Linux on your own and you fire up a Linux machine or VM somewhere else. I want to give you commands and knowledge that will transfer across whatever distro you get into. For example, I would want you to get to a distro, enter a command, and Linux tell you, like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand that command. So starting off, we try to keep you engaged in commands and things that are pretty universal across the board. And that's why the approach is what it is here. All right. So now, and I'm watching you all's chat over here to the right. So now the next thing is we'll go ahead and click next on PWD. Assuming everybody's got that, I'll just check chat here. Let me know if you all are ready to move on from PWD. All right, so the next step, we need to look at modifiers. And with this, I kind of want to go off of the script of the lab for just a little bit, or from the range just a little bit, because what PS shows you is a list of currently running processes. Okay, now let's translate that and just watch, just pay attention. Let's translate that to Windows for a second. And I'm just going to fire up a Windows virtual machine here. And just kind of give you some basic conceptual ideas. So most of you have in Windows probably done Control Alt Delete and you end up with Task Manager. And you can see things like, you're running services in Windows. I think a lot of you probably seen this before, seen someone do it before. So this is the GUI way in Windows to show you a list of your current processes. Okay, and if you wanted to, for example, end a process, you could do that by simply right-clicking said process and then saying end task. What we're going to look at is the Linux command line way to do the same things. Now, for example, there is a Windows command line way as well. I'm going to kind of parallel Linux and Windows on this for you. In Windows, if I wanted to see the equivalent of those running processes without going into a GUI, I would do that by typing the command task list. All right, that is the Windows command line way. This works across all versions of Windows. I'm just going to change the font size just a little bit here. task list is the Windows command line way for you to see all the running processes in Windows. So it's like Task Manager without the GUI. All right. Now that we've seen the Windows way to do that, let's you do this with me. Let's go back into our range, and we're going to look at running processes in Linux. So PS-A is the Linux equivalent to the task list command that you just saw in Windows. So if we run that, it shows us the currently running processes in this Linux distribution that we're using here, which is a flavor of Debian as well. And I'll let everybody catch up to that. All right. So that's how that works. That's PS-A. Now, as you notice, and here's another important piece here. When we ran PS-A, you notice half of the information went off the screen. For example, process number one here, the system daemon, you weren't able to see it because it scrolled off the screen. So if I do PS-A again, it scrolls all the way down to the bottom. So how do we tell Linux to say, hey, chill out for a minute, don't go so fast, show me one page of stuff at a time. So show me the first page and then stop and let me decide when it's time to move on to the next page of stuff. Well, the way that we can do that is we can pipe the output, which is what you see on the screen here, to another command. In this case, we're going to pipe it to something called more. Okay. And when I say pipe, when you hear us in the industry say pipe, it means this symbol right here. And on most of your keyboards, if you've got a MacBook, it's going to be the symbol that's right below delete, but the shift version of that. It's the horizontal line. Okay. So the way this works is if we do PS-A again, and then that horizontal line, which is the pipe symbol, or sorry, vertical line, which is the pipe symbol, and then send it to more like so, what it'll do is it'll print the information, but it stops on the first page. And it says, hey, if you want to see what's next, all right, watch very closely. If I hit enter, it goes one line at a time. See how it went from 24 to 25? If I hit enter again, it'll go from 25 to 26. 26 to 27, or to the next command. That's just me hitting enter. But if I wanted to go an entire page at a time, I would hit the space bar. So if I hit space, it's going an entire page at a time versus going one line at a time, which is what we get with enter here, right? That's enter, line at a time, and then space, page at a time. Right? These little nuggets here are important because as you get into more advanced things for whatever it is you go into, pen testing, incident response, even auditing, these little nuggets here are what's going to make the difference in you being efficient and effective at what you're doing versus just going through a bunch of processes. Right? So I'll give everybody a moment here with more. And you can just let me know in chat when you're done with more. And after a few people say they are, we'll move on to the next thing, which will be using more by itself. Yep, Scott, thank you for that. Yep. Remember, everything in Linux is extremely case specific. Everything. So if I type a capital A, that means you have to type a capital A. It's not like in Linux, not like in Windows. And Scott, since you brought that point up, thank you for bringing it up. Let me just show you all what the difference is and why some of you are a little confused. Okay, while we're waiting on people to do PS. So in Linux, I'm going to make a directory here. You don't need to do this with. I'm going to make a directory called Keatron with a capital K, and then I'm going to make a directory called Keatron with a lowercase k. Okay? If I did cd Keatron like that, it's going to go into that directory. Right? If I go back one directory and I do cd Keatron with a lowercase k, it's going to put me in that directory, which is a completely different directory. Notice it let me create the two directories because in Linux, a lowercase Keatron and an uppercase Keatron are not equal. So it let me create both directories. Now watch the comparison in Windows. When I go to the Windows command line, if I try to do the same thing, I'm going to just make a directory. So there's my lowercase Keatron. If I try to make a directory with a capital, it tells me it already exists. That is because in Windows, it's not case sensitive, whereas the Linux operating system is case sensitive. So you could be watching a tutorial and trying to follow someone doing commands and techniques, but if you don't know in the back of your mind that, hey, I'm in Linux, I have to remember everything is case sensitive. So all of this is going to matter. It's going to matter whether it's up or lower. You would completely be typing the command run and not even realizing it because you forgot that. So thank you again, Scott, for reminding everyone that the case sensitivity matters in Linux. It doesn't matter in Windows, but it matters in Linux. Okay, and this is a classic example of that. It wouldn't let me do that here because if I did change directories, if I did cd, even though the directory is a lowercase Keatron, if I did it like this, it's still going to go into the lowercase because it doesn't care about case. But in Linux, it absolutely matters. It absolutely matters. And that's one of the this is one of the key things that people have trouble with when they're learning Linux is the case sensitivity thing. You start typing stuff wrong and all that. Now I'm going to show you a shortcut to that problem here in just a moment. And you're going to, as before this day's over, those of you that are new to Linux, you're going to really start to understand why those of us that do cybersecurity and in the trenches type technical work, why we love Linux so much more. You're going to figure that out by the end of the day. So the next thing is you can use more by itself, right? Like you can pipe things to more to read a file, or you can just read a file. Right now, this file that we're going to read here is the etc services file. In the world of networking, you have these things called services that listen on these things called ports. Think of the ports as like doors. Every service listens on its own door. And there's a commonality as to what services we assign to what door or port. For example, if we wanted a web service, we generally have that listen on port 80 or 443 or door 80 or 443. Now, later in these sessions, probably like, within the next 3 months, we're going to get into the networking stuff and get into network fundamentals, and we'll dig deeper into that. But just for now, just remember a port is like a door, and behind that door is some service. And for you to get to that service, you have to go through that door. And in the world of networking, we have 65,535 of those doors. So that's a lot of possible services. But If you want to get a list of what common services listen on what ports, we can look in Linux at the etc services file. So if you type more etc services, it's showing you this long file. But remember, one page at a time. So if we hit enter, it goes one line. If we hit space, it goes one page at a time. Right? Now, that's very useful for a lot of different reasons, just to be able to read a file. And what we're showing you here is how you can read data or read a file on the command line without having to go and open that file. Now, we can do this in Windows as well. So again, let's pause. Let me go over to the Windows side and show you what the equivalent would be. All right, so we're gonna open Notepad. I think most of you are familiar with that. And I'm just gonna type a text file named Keatron is here, and then I'm gonna save that file to my desktop. And we're just gonna call it Keatron.txt. All right, so you all know that, of course, if we go to our desktop, there's a file, we can double click it and open it. Great, everybody probably knows how to do that. Most of you are pretty versed with the Windows GUI. But did you also know you can read this text file from the Windows command line? And you should practice this on your own Windows machines, reading stuff from the command line. That more command that we just learned about in Linux, it's also transferable to Windows. Now, we see the file's name Keatron.txt. So if I try to read that here, it's going to tell me it can't access it. Why? Because that file is actually on the desktop, and I'm not on the desktop. So to get to the desktop, I'll need to go back to my profile, which is administrator, and then change to the desktop folder. And now, who can tell me I'm going to quiz you all now. In Linux, we learned, right, that if we want to know what current directory we're in, it's an ls command. What is the command in Windows? Excuse me, no, it's in the directory. What's the command in Windows to get a list of files that's in here? Correct, dir. So directory or dir shows us files, and you can see that Keatron.txt is actually in there. Okay. So just like we use more in Linux, I can use more Keatron.txt, and I can actually read the contents of that text file on the Windows command line, just like we can read the contents of text files on the Linux command line. And for those of you that don't have a cyber range or don't have a Linux environment to play in, you can definitely play with this on your Windows machine. All right, so this is how we are able to read this text file. And a lot of what you're going to learn once I do the pen testing demo after our break here, you're going to learn that there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on. A big part of doing this work is you're grabbing information from places, and then you need to quickly read that information and quickly extract out of it what's important, and then use what's important to move on to the next step. That's a big part of a lot of security work, especially if you're doing security work where you have to make decisions. And these little command line tools will make you very swift and nimble at doing that. All right. So back over here, remember, enter one line at a time, space, page at a time. All right. Now let's move on from that. Okay. So now you're going to get introduced to a concept that is basically starting an actual process. Okay. So we're going to start the program T-Shark, which is a packet sniffer. That T-Shark is a command line version of what is commonly known in the industry as Wireshark. And most of us that do security work, technical security work, have used Wireshark for many different things. But we're sticking with command line in this session. So we're going to sudo and start T-Shark. We're going to do -F, and then we're going to put in quotes ICMP, And let me explain to you what all these things are. When we do sudo, what's happening there is this. The T-shark process, it's actually going to have to do something called binding or connecting to hardware or virtual hardware. And the only way you can do that is you have to have elevated privileges. Now, the account that you're running with in this environment is not an elevated privilege account. It's a low privilege account. And it's because we don't want you guys going crazy in the environment and redoing everything, right? I'm pretty sure some people would do that. So you're running with a very low privilege, but to do certain commands, we have allowed you to be able to temporarily go to a high privilege to be able to run that command specifically. So for example, you are able to do sudo without entering an elevated password. In other words, you're being able to temporarily jump to a privilege level that you don't have to run this command, the T-shark command. And then we're doing a filter here and saying only show us ICMP traffic. That's what's happening. Don't worry about what ICMP traffic is. It's just a specific type of traffic that we use to find things. It's basically, we primarily use it for ping. Now there's a bunch of different ways we use it, but ping is one of the common ways. And if you've watched any submarine movies or any more movies, you know that ping means you send something out and wait for it to bounce back to you to know information about what's out there, okay? Now, when we run this command, ls is a Linux command, preferred command, and dir is a Windows preferred command. But be mindful of the fact that dir can work in Linux and Windows. ls only works in Linux. So for example, in this console here, if I did dir, it knows what I mean. But if you went to Windows and did ls, Windows has no idea what you mean because that's not part of its command base. All right, so now we can see the T-shark process is started. And once it completely starts up, it gives you the ability to move on, to the next step. It gives you the green thumb. So go ahead and click next on that. And now it's asking us to switch to a second console. And this is something that happens in the real world. You might have one Linux terminal running and you got something going in there that you need to be paying attention to that you can't stop. So you pop up another terminal to do some other exercise while we're waiting on that. This is something that we do all day, every day. When you see me doing pen test demonstrations and you see other people doing pen tests or incident response or any type of technical demonstrations, and you see all these windows popping up and you're like, man, that person must be really smart because they got all these things going. No, it's just common practice, because you might have something running in one window and it's going to take that a little bit of time, but while that's happening, let's do something else. You're multitasking. So having multiple consoles is just a way that we multitask. We're going ahead and doing something else while we're waiting on the other thing. Now, in a real situation, what we would do is, let me just show you in my Debian distro here, which is basically Kali Linux. In a real situation, what we would do is we would have our tab like this, right? I've got real windows here, multiple windows that are running. And in this particular piece here, I'm investigating a piece of malware called a rootkit that's running memory. But I've got multiple tabs open doing that, right? And I can just click between them. So what we're simulating in the range here is just the same thing. We're simulating, okay, we've got T-shark running in this tab. So now let's click on a second tab so we can do other work, right? So go ahead and click on console 2. It takes us to a new console and it gives us a congratulatory thumbs up for that. Okay. Now we get to introduce you to one of the things that was a life changer for me back in the day, many, many, many years ago when I started working with Linux and doing security work. That is something called grep, and it's a regular expression operation that allows you to look for certain strings. Okay, now let me show you the concept behind it. Remember, if we do ps-a like so, it shows us all the running processes. That's review from what we did earlier. But now there is a lot of processes here. What if I just wanted to see the T-sharp process? I don't want to see all the other processes. I want to see just T-sharp. So if I wanted to do that, I could pipe. Remember the pipe symbol? Remember that horizontal line? We can pipe from any command to any command. Now, we might not like the results we get sometimes, but you can pipe from anything to anything. So I'm going to do PS-A. And I'm going to say grep T-sharp. So what that's saying is, hey, PS-A, go ahead and print out all of the processes that are running, but only show me on my screen the lines that have T-sharp in it. So if we enter that, what happens is it shows us just T-sharp. Now understand your T-sharp PID or process identifier number here is going to be different than mine, because on every system, at any point in time, a process can have any identifier. So your identifier is not going to be 1954, just like it's not going to be 2013, which is what it was when we, took the screenshot. But the point is, now you can see that process identifier there. All right. So with grep, let's pause here. I'm going to go off and show you a real world pen testing or investigative type of process where grep is something that we use thousands of times a day if we're working on a big project. So let me just jump into a real machine here. Okay, so what I'm doing, to make it simple, I'm using a memory forensic tool, volatility, to look at a memory dump. And remember, when you're working on a computer, when you're using your computer, everything that you do, every command that you type, every program that you have running, every file that you have open, every web page you're looking at, every video you're looking at, everything you're listening to, all of that stuff is happening in memory. So just as a baseline of understanding, for you to go forward in your computer, always remember that whatever your computer is doing, it's happening in memory. Memory is where it does things. You don't want to think of it as in the way you think of your own mind's memory. You want to think of it as like the brain that's actually doing stuff in real time. Okay, almost like we would think of our brain. But what we're looking at here is we're using PS3 to look at a list of programs that were running in a machine at the time of the memory dump. So I know that I've gotten intel that there's netcat maybe in use in the environment. So if I got this list of processes like this, even though this is a complex forensics tool, guess what? For me to look for netcat, I'm just going to say grep nc.exe. And it shows me, oh yeah, here's a netcat process. Here's its PID. So now I can go look for that PID throughout memory. Right? Or I might just run a Linux strings command against the entire memory dump, which is like all 32 gigs of memory that machine had, and tell it to show me any instances of nc.exe that's ever happened in memory on that machine. And as you can see, it's happened quite a bit. Netcat been ran a lot on this machine apparently. Right? Now, from an investigative standpoint, I can say, okay, well, the attacker, and this was a real situation here. I've sanitized it so you won't ever be able to see a customer or anything like that. But I can see that the attacker, the threat actor, whoever you want to call them, it appears they had netcat listed on port 100. So now that's giving me another piece of information. Remember, I got this from using grep. I know that there was some malicious process listing on port 100. So now I can go back to my memory forensics tool. I can tell it to not do PS tree, but let's do a command called connections. And I want to see if there's any connections related to port 100. Oh, and look at that. There is a process that has a connection on port 100. So that malicious process is being used. And the process identifier that's associated is 3772, right? So what I'm showing you here, I don't need you to try to understand how volatility works and all that. What I'm showing you, this is the real investigative technique that we do every single day on some of the biggest data breaches that you've heard about. You know, this case right here that I'm working on, I can guarantee you that if I told you the case, you would be, oh yeah, I saw that in the news within the last couple of years. So this is a real thing that we were doing, watching these threat actors move horizontally in this environment, you know, as a result of the SolarWinds thing. Now, this wasn't SolarWinds, but this was a customer that was affected by it, right? So we can see that, and this is how we find these things. So now I know that it's port 100. I know that the process that I should be looking for is 3772. So now I can go and look at all the running processes, and again, grep for 3772 and find out what that process is. And look at it's netcat.exe and it spawned command.exe. Right? Now I can go into PS tree and find that 3772 process, which is right there. And I can also now see that that process is a child of this process right here. Now, when I research this process, extract it out of memory and do an analysis of it, I find it is a rootkit, which is a very devastating type of hidden backdoor. But I would have never gotten there without what you're learning about right now, plain old grep. So while these are fundamentals, you have to have them able to recall from memory at an instant. You have to be able to recall it like you would a utility. Okay? If I told you to get in your car and go, you know, drive from here in Tyson's to downtown DC to the Washington Monument, I wouldn't have to give you detailed instructions about how to use your signal to change lanes, right? Or how to put your car in reverse to back up to park. These are utilities that at one time were very tough things for you to master. Think about when you first learned to drive. Being able to turn that signal on while trying to see if there's something in the other lane, you know, you just got terrified when you did that, afraid you're going to hit another car. But over time, doing it repeatedly, it becomes second nature to you. You don't have to think about it. I don't think about when to use grep. What I think about is I'm trying to find some information. Oh, here's a lot of information. Let me look through this information for what I need. How do I do that? Grep. If I'm looking, you know, if I'm looking for David Bradley, I grep for David Bradley. One of the most profound lessons I've ever given on grep is once I was teaching a paid for class, and I'm a big SEC fan because I grew up in Mississippi. So any SEC team that's playing any other team in any other conference, I'm rooting for the SEC team. And we had an argument going that the SEC had more national football championships than the Big Ten. This person was a big Ohio State fan. And I taught that person how to use grep by showing them that the SEC indeed has more national championships than the Big Ten. Right? So you can find all kinds of ways to utilize these techniques. And one of the things that's going to make you great at it is finding a way to use it that's conducive and useful to you. Those of you that do project management and stuff like that, and you're trying to transfer and build up your cyber knowledge, because I know some of you are in this call. Think about the big spreadsheets that you use, where you have to write pivot tables and stuff like that to find information. grep is it's like the pivot table on steroids. It's built into every Linux command line. And if you're trying to get information at a glance, it's a much better way to do it. All right, I'm going to show you some other usages of that as well that we use in pen testing. And then I'll let you all take a break here in a moment. So, for example, let's do this live. I'm going to, like I told you, I grew up in Mississippi. We'll use Mississippi State. So I'm going to use a tool on DNS Recon. What's that called? That's a switch, right? So that's a switch for DNS Recon. It means domain. For the domain, msstate.edu. So again, right here, we're still using basic stuff. I'm still having to know how switches work. Let's see if we are even connected to the internet here. Oh yeah, we gotta get this machine back connected. We'll give it a second to come back. It's getting there. And while we're waiting on it, let me just check the others here. All right. So once we run this command, what we end up with is this file that looks like this, right? And what it shows us is all of the devices that Mississippi State has that are listed out and publicly reachable. So we're not hacking here, right? These are all publicly reachable things. So what's important here is, let's say I only cared about the things that were related, since this is a college, faculty. So I could take all this information and I could just grep for faculty, and then I only see the records, DNS records that are associated with faculty. If I wanted to just look for test devices, things that they got in beta or test, I could just grep for test. And now I could see their devices that are publicly reachable that are test devices. And from a hacking standpoint, from a pen test standpoint, it's likely that in most organizations, their test stuff is not as locked down as their production stuff because it's just test stuff. So this might be my initial entry point into that organization if I were doing a pen test. How do I take those thousands of lines of data and just focus on these ones? I did it because of grep. And that's the importance. I still might have to restart VMware here to get connected. But that's the importance of grep, right? So when we're having you go through these basic commands, I don't need you to just go through it long enough to say you've done it. Like, I need you to actually have spent time doing it to where you're comfortable with it and you kind of mastered it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take ourselves a 10-minute break. Let you guys go to the bathroom, get coffee, do whatever you need to do. And it is right now 12:25 Eastern. So let's say 12:35 Eastern time, we'll resume with some content here. Everybody good with that? And just let me know in chat when you are. All right, we are back. And it's possible that your lab timed out. If it did, you could just restart it. All right. So one other thing I want to point out here is if you look at my channel, there's a lot of video content on there. There's the entire Cybersecurity Foundations course, and that course that I created is one of the best-selling on our skills platform. But it's also I've made it available, most of it available for free on the on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the free version of the skills account. You can have a free skills account. The difference is when you have a free version of the skills account, you don't get access to all 1,200 courses. But no matter which version you get the Cybersecurity Foundations course that I created for free. That's part of the free package that's offered there. So keep that in mind and definitely check that out. I strongly encourage, I think that all of you that haven't been through it already, when you're done today, I encourage you to start slowly going through my foundations course, the full course that's in the skills platform, and kind of have been through it entirely by the time we meet again next month, because we're chugging our way along to that stuff. We're going to get into cloud services. You're going to learn how to do cloud stuff. But these, again, are the very beginning, learning how to walk, learning the alphabet types of things that we're doing here. And I promise you, just hang in there. It'll be worth it. Once you actually start to, then you'll be ready to go take those entry level boot camps and things like that, because you'll actually be ready for it then. All right. So let's see here. Just put a back message. All right. So now just get back into your VM environment here, your lab environment. If it turned out, we're going to do some stuff together again. And in this case, we're not going to go directly to step by step. I'm going to show you some things that you need to know that's going to tremendously speed you up. And what we're going to start with is we're just going to start with the more Etsy services command, but I want to show you something different with it. Okay. So if we do more slash Etsy slash, and then I want you to do SER. And after you type SER, just hit tab. And what should happen is it should auto complete the word services for you. So I'll let everybody catch up to that point. All right, so did everybody get their more Etsy services to autocomplete form? All right, now that might not seem like a big deal, but you know when you watch us do demonstrations and things like that, and it seems like we're going through this stuff really, really fast, it's mostly because of autocomplete. Like we're auto completing a lot of those things. Let me show you where it's really helpful. I'm going to make a directory and look at the name of this directory. Right. So look at that directory name. Let me guarantee you one thing. If you ask me to type that out 10 times, I can tell you that 9 out of those 10 times, I would not be able to, I would typo that. I would miss a character or something. Where autocomplete saves you is if I wanted to change that directory, if I just type K2 and then hit tab, it auto does the rest of that. This is where you start to take advantage of the actual compute power and take some of the load off your brain. Right? Does that make sense to everyone? So this is why autocomplete is such an important thing. Now, to add to that, let's do this together. We're going to do more Etsy services again. But this time, just do more Etsy and just do SE. Don't do SER, just do SE. And hit tab twice. Remember, you got to hit tab twice. What it shows you is like, look, I know you're trying to autocomplete something. However, there are more than one thing. There's multiple things that begin with SE. There's that. There's SE Linux. There's sensors. There's SE Toolkit. There's security or services. Which one are you looking for? It's basically saying you have not given me enough information here. Okay. So I look at that and say, all right, oh yeah, I'm trying to go to services. Let me add the R and hit tab again, and then it auto completes Etsy services there. Right? Now, this is something, this little, I guess we could call it technique. This is something that most of us evolve into over time. But if someone had sit down and showed me this in the beginning, I wouldn't have had to evolve into it. I would have started depending on it and using it right away, which would have sped up my ability to really start learning stuff that I needed to learn. Okay. That's the purpose of that. And even if you sit and go through this cyber range by yourself, like if you sit and just went through these labs, because they are self-guided, you could go through them. These little pieces that I'm showing you now is what you wouldn't get from doing that. It's just not going to, the lesson's not going to come off the same way if someone's not explaining to you the context behind why you're using this and why you'd ever use it. That's the purpose of that. Now, within this framework, as I've said, we've done a few things. We've typed a few commands. If you ever want to know what you've typed during a session of that Linux distro being running, just type the command history, and it shows you the history of all your commands. Okay. Now, let me show you another trick. If you wanted to run a command from your history, let's say I wanted to repeat the command more Etsy services. How would I recall that from history? Well, I can do exclamation and then the number 2 because that's the number of that command, and it will repeat that more Etsy services command. Let me show you that again. All right, this will save you some time. If I do history and look at the history of all my commands, if I wanted to repeat this command right here, I could just do !2 and it would repeat that command. That'll save you some time, I promise you. Okay? Let me show you what I mean by that. And I'll let everybody catch up to this point. What I mean by that is this. Let's go back to a real world scenario. On this distro, I've entered a ton of commands, right? So if you look at my history file for this Linux VM, look at how many it is. It's like hundreds of commands there that I've run over time. Okay. Let's say I wanted to repeat the IPA command, which is command number 473. And then after I ran that command, I wanted to run clear, which is command 474. Watch this. I'm going to do 473. 473. That shows my IP configuration. It does IPA from my history. And then if I want to do 474 after, I could do that. And that clears my screen. But what if I wanted to run those two one after the other? Watch this. I can do 473, which is the IP config, and then I can say ampersand and do 474. And it actually just clears the screen because it ran the first one and then it ran the second one. And you can string these commands together like that in Windows or Linux. If I went to my Windows command line here, and I want to do IP config, I could say IP config and dir, right, with the ampersands, and it'll actually run both commands. So it ran IP config first, which is what you see up here, and then it ran the dir command second. Okay. Now, if one command fails, the other is not going to run if you're using the ampersands. If you want the second command to run, regardless of whether the first one is correct or not. So, for example, if I did this, if I said IP config and dir, it never makes it to the dir because the IP config command broke. But look at the slight difference here. If I did IP config, type that incorrectly, and I use two pipe symbols, notice even though the first command failed, it still ran the second. This is transferable across Linux and Windows. So if you ever get to the point in your career where you're writing a script or something like that, these things are going to become important because you might want the script to say like, hey, if this fails, still go ahead and do the second thing because that's going to be important for a different reason. Or you might have a script logic that says, if the first command fails, don't even bother running the second because that's just going to break things, right? That's the difference between the two ampersands and the two pipe symbols, the two pipes. Okay, and you can practice that. Is everybody tracking with that so far? And I'll kind of pause here and catch up on messages and give everybody a chance to catch up. Now, what's going to keep you all solid on this? I'm going to encourage you to, for the next month until we do this again, come back and watch this video and repeat these things. Like do them over and over again until it becomes more comfortable to you, and it starts to become part of how you think, right? When you're looking at information and stuff like that. Because as you repeat this and as you make it, you get it under your fingers, that's what'll happen. And it'll become more and more a part of how you approach things and how you think about things. It won't necessarily be something that's just been foreign to you. It's something you'll actually think about. All right. And again, works in Windows and Linux. So let me catch my comments. Autocomplete work, damn. Yes, very helpful. Awesome basics. Thumbs up. You just blew my mind. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you guys for the good feedback. All right. So next, we're going to start thinking about, how to make even that stuff a little more automated. So I want you to do the following for me. This is a little tough. I'm going to kind of put my keyboard up so you can see. So I'm going to be hitting the command. You're going to hit the control key and the R key simultaneously. So you're going to do control R. And it should bring up a weird prompt that looks like that. Okay. So what that is a reverse grep search. And what that's for is you can search through history for instances of a command that you ran. For example, if I type the command more, it's going to show me, hey, the last time you used more, you typed this. And if I just do control R repeatedly, once I get a command in there, if I toggle by hitting control R repeatedly, it'll cycle through all of the more commands that I've entered. Now, in this case, we only have a few commands because we restarted our session after the break. But watch this. If I go to a real machine with a lot of commands in it, history-wise, and I do control R, all right, and I'm just going to do nmap, it shows me the last nmap command that I typed. But watch this. If I do control R repeatedly, it cycles through every nmap command that I've typed in this terminal, like that. That's a huge time saver, especially if you don't want to go back through all your command history, but you just want to go back through the history of a certain command. That is a quick way to do that. All right. That's very useful. And again, it's something that's not very often taught. Now, the basic version of that, and again, some people don't know this, since I'm assuming some of you are absolute beginners. If you just hit your up arrow, if you look at your keyboard, look for the arrow that points up. If you just hit that repeatedly, it just goes back through all the commands that you typed. Right? In this case, we don't have a lot, but you go up to go back in history, and then you can go down to go forward from that point that you went back. And Christian, thank you for that comment, because what that reflects is what I said in the beginning. Even though I've been doing this for almost 20 years, still sometimes I forget some of the basics. And some of the basics, believe it or not, the sum of basics is sometimes what makes you advanced. If you can take 5 basic things and use them properly, that can equal really advanced. But you have to really have mastered those basic things for your mind to be able to even think in the context of putting them together. A loading screen back to root. That could be a shortcut setting in your browser, Scott, but it's just Control R, and that's what you get in real Linux distros. All right. Any questions about any of those commands that we've looked at so far? Because I do want to show you how to check your IP address. And we want to talk a little bit about what an IP address actually is, because it's not to be assumed that you all know what that is. Everybody good? All right. So now I'm going to do two things. I'm going to pique your interest a little bit in cloud, because we're going to have an entire Saturday dedicated to just introduction to cloud, to get you all set up with cloud accounts in Amazon, Microsoft, and get you working in cloud technologies for free, to where you're not spending money doing it. And I'm working with both those vendors on some solutions here to where you won't have to pay money to use any of those services. I mean, you can use both of them for free if you don't go over a certain amount. But I'm working on something special for you all in that regard. So now, one of the things I want to show you is I'm going to go out and just pay attention to this to explain to you what an IP address is. All right. So what I want you to think about is, if I wanted to call my mom right now on my phone, I would have to pick up my phone, go into my database or my contacts, find my mom's name, click her name, and then click call. And what would happen is my phone, based on that association to that database, would dial the number that's associated with my mom's name. Okay. That is something that we call, the equivalent to that when we visit websites and visit things on the internet, is something called DNS. It's a service. So when you visit Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or LinkedIn or InfoSec or whatever site it is you're visiting, you're not actually ever visiting Facebook.com or Yahoo.com. You're actually visiting the IP address that site sits at. The reason you put in Yahoo or Amazon.com instead of an IP address, because understand there's billions of sites now. And for you to get to any site, you'd have to remember its IP address. And we are not equipped mentally to remember billions of IP addresses. Or we don't want to have a list or a sheet of paper that we have to scroll through to actually go to a specific website by IP. So the way to fix that, we created a huge, massive database that's now distributed and duplicated across the backbone of the internet. And these are called DNS records, or zone database files. And all they have in there is yahoo.com equals this IP address, facebook.com equals this IP address. And by the way, those IP addresses change over time. That record changes as those IPs change. This is why you never have to worry about that. And you can just enter amazon.com and you get Amazon, right? Simply because of the fact that there is a DNS infrastructure that's sitting there with these huge text files that say Amazon equals this IP, Yahoo equals this IP. So I want you to think of IP addresses the same way you would think of phone numbers. If I wanted to call my mom, I'd have to click on her name, and then the phone would look up the number associated with her name and dial that number. This is what happens when you visit a website or any resource on the internet, right? Now, if that makes sense, let me show you why cloud services. Actually, I'm devoting 3 Saturdays to just cloud technologies. And the reason is because cloud is something that's here to stay. If you're going to be serious about getting into cybersecurity, you're going to have to understand cloud technologies at some level. because every major corporation has made a significant investment and movement toward cloud. Every major government organization has made a significant investment and movement towards cloud. As a matter of fact, one of the three largest banks in the country, in the US, Capital One, has completely went 100% cloud. And this was a white paper um, that was released by Amazon last week, or this week actually. And it's basically a case study in how they did it. All right. And this is a good white paper for you all to read. So let me actually put this in chat, because if there's ever a point in these sessions that we're doing, and I'm planning to actually be in here with you all, I think we'll probably be doing this for at least a year. These once a month Saturday sessions, because I'm planning for this thing to grow really big. But if you ever question yourself, like when we're going through cloud stuff and I'm teaching you that, if you ever say, why are we learning this for introduction to cybersecurity? This should be an indicator as to why. And now let me show you why organizations are rapidly migrating to this, right? So watch closely the things I'm going to go through. What I'm going to do is go into my account, and this might be a good account. It might be expired also. So this is one of my test research play with it cloud accounts. So follow me closely here. I'm going to go into my EC2. Don't worry about knowing what that is. It's just a type of service. I'm going to actually create a new instance. So what this means is I'm standing up a virtual machine, which is the equivalent to an actual physical computer. I'm standing that up in Amazon's cloud. So I'm connected to Amazon's cloud via this web browser. And now inside that cloud, I'm about to stand up a machine that I control that's in their cloud. Okay. And I'm going to make that machine a Windows machine. So I'm going to scroll down here. And let's just go with 2016 base. Or another. This right here works. Now this is free tier eligible, which means I can build this without being charged anything, as long as I don't get too crazy with the specifics. All right, so let me show you one of the first things that attracts people to cloud technology. If I wanted, I could build this virtual machine with 448 CPUs, processors, 12 terabytes, that's terabytes, 12 terabytes of RAM. So you tell me where you can at your house physically build a machine with 448 processors and 12 terabytes of RAM. I'll wait. Can't do it without spending millions of dollars on hardware and stuff like that. I can build this and run it for about $180 an hour in this cloud platform. And then when I'm done with it, if I use it for 2 hours, I could shut it down and I only pay for those 2 hours. That is one of the primary things that's going to significantly change how we do computing. What this means is now you can take a small mom and pop shop that can create a product that rivals the same product that you could buy in Walmart. And if the mom and pop shop's product is better, people can go to their website and buy it, because even though they can't afford to build a big data center like Walmart, they can build a big data center in the cloud for an hour or a Saturday, or the 2 weeks before and after Christmas, right? They can afford now to compete resource wise because they only pay for the time that they use it, versus before it was just not even feasible for them to even be able to handle the volume if their product did become popular. So these are some of the things that's changing because of the ability to do stuff like this. Just a click of a button. All right, and let me show you what I mean by click of a button or click of a few buttons. So now I'm not going to build that big a one because I don't want to pay the 180 bucks an hour for it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it 8 processors and 32 gigs RAM. That should be plenty for what we're going to do. So I'm going to go next, do configuration details. All right. I'm going to add storage. And I've got several virtual private clouds or my own little networks inside Amazon's network that I use for malware testing and other things. But I can choose which virtual private cloud or which little network in Amazon's network I want to put this VM in. I'm going to leave it set to the default one. All right. I'm going to go next to add storage. Okay, by default, it's giving me a 30 gig hard drive. Let's just go with 500 gig for that OS drive. If I wanted, I can add a new secondary hard drive here. Like we partition, we'd have one hard drive that's our primary operating system, and then we'd have a second hard drive that could be like storage, or we could have a bunch of hard drives that are storage and operations and databases and things like that. And one part of cloud here is with these devices, these hard drives, we can specify not only different sizes, but I can specify different hardware configurations. So for example, if I were going to be running a very high interaction database that needed to be able to run really super, super duper fast, then I could pick, general purpose IOPS, SSD, or solid state drive here. Or I could do provision IOPS to make it go really fast. Or if I'm just going to use it to store like photos and videos that I might use like once every 6 months, I could do cold HDD, which is the absolute cheapest on here, because it's not going to be frequently accessed. I'm going to access it very infrequently. So I have those engineering and architecture options here as I'm building this VM on the fly. And we're just going to not build a second one. We're going to just stick with the first drive. And I can choose whether I want to encrypt my drive or not right here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add tags. What that means is I want to name this VM. So I'm going to say my first tag is name. And then the value that I want to give it is, let's just call it Cyber Foundations. We're going to call you all the first class, like X-Men first class. Because that's what I envision you all as being, like the next generation of cyber people that's actually going to fix all these problems that we've created over the years. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and say review and launch. All right. And it says, are you sure? And I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and launch it. Now, again, some more foundational stuff here. I know encryption scares some of you, cryptography, but let me just explain what's at a very high level what's going on here. Amazon is saying, look, in order for us to secure this machine, we need you to create a key pair. In other words, we're going to do an asymmetric cryptographic operation here. And what that means is you have 2 keys. And if you lock something with one key, it can only ever be unlocked with this other key. Okay? Doesn't matter which way. If I lock something with the private key, I can only ever unlock it with the public key. So what Amazon is saying is, we're going to take your public key and we're going to lock something. And we're going to there's only one copy of the private key, and we're going to give that to you. So pick a key pair. I'm going to go ahead and say, create a new one. And we're going to call it Cyber Foundations first class. All right. Now, at that instant, that private encryption key only exists on my machine here in my house. That key does not exist anywhere else in the world. Amazon makes it very clear, like, look, if you lose this key, We can't make another one for you. That would defeat the purpose of encryption if we could just make another one. We've made this key for you. It's the only one in the world in existence. So it's the only one that you can actually use to decrypt something encrypted with the public key. They're saying we are going to maintain a copy of your public key, and we're going to use that public key to generate a password and encrypt it to access this VM. So I say, great, I download the key, I launch it. What's going to happen is once this VM is running, for me to be able to log into it, I'm going to have to decrypt the password. Amazon's going to give me the encrypted version of the password that they encrypted with the public key, knowing that even if someone intercepted it, they wouldn't be able to decrypt it because I'm the only one in the world that's got the private key that can decrypt that, right? That's what just happened there. So now, if I go to view instance, you can see the Cyber Foundations first class starting up here. It says it's initializing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in chat the IP address. Remember, we talked about IP address and phone numbers. So I'm going to put in chat this IP right here. That's the IP address for this machine. I'm going to put it in chat because I'm going to have you all browse to it here in a moment. All right, in chat, that's the IP of that machine. All right, so for me to connect to it and manage it, okay, here's what I have to do. I got to go to connect. I'm going to use an RDP client, which is remote desktop. This is Microsoft's own proprietary, hey, I need a way to remotely or from somewhere else, connect to my server. This is Microsoft's solution. It's called RDP. So I'm going to download the Microsoft RDP file, which tells me how to get there. And the username I'm going to log in with by default is administrator, and the password, I have to now upload my private key that only I have a copy of, which is this one. So now I put my private key in, and if you've ever wondered what a 2048-bit private key look like and why they're so hard to break, this is what a 248-bit encryption key looks like, an RSA key. So now I'm going to apply that to the public key encrypted password and hit decrypt, and then now I know the actual password is this right here because I just decrypted it using the private key that only I have. Okay, so now I've downloaded the RDP client. I'm going to open that RDP client using my Mac Pro's Microsoft Remote Desktop client here. And it says enter the password. To do that, I enter it. I say okay to the certificate warning. And now, just that quickly, we've stood up a server in the Amazon cloud. Now we're connecting to that server. Just that fast. So we have a fully functioning server in the cloud that's actually publicly accessible. Now, we haven't put anything on it yet to make it so people can get to it, but we've made it accessible now. All right. And that's where we are. It's logging us in. And now we are connected to that server in the Amazon cloud, and only we control it. So the next part to make this cool for you is I'm going to set up a website on it and make it so you can browse to it. And remember, I posted that IP address in chat. All right. So let's go ahead and first, I'm going to configure this thing to be a web server. And this again is just a preview of all the stuff that you're going to learn and why it's important. In Windows, I need to add a role. Someone asked me why is operating system fundamentals important? It's because you need to know how to do stuff like this if you're going to learn how to secure these things. And all I'm doing is I'm adding a new role because these servers, by default, they do very basic things, but they are extremely expandable. So what I'm doing by adding a new role or feature here is I'm expanding on what it can do. And in this case, I want to make it a web server, which is a specific type of service that can serve you, the public, out websites and content. Okay. So I'm going to go and do that. Click next, find the Microsoft Web Server IIS service there. I want to add that feature. Going to go to next, let it install it. It's going to ask me, am I okay with installing dependencies that go with it? I'm going to say yes. Next, next, and install. And now it's installing the service that makes this thing an actual web server. Now, before we get into cloud, I'm going to say probably 4 or 5 sessions from today, we're going to get deep into the basics of networking. And that's because you have to understand not only how operating systems work and things like that, but you have to understand how one operating system talks to another across a network or across a collection of networks like the internet, right? These are fundamental things that you have to understand, because if you go jump into a CCNA course or a Security Plus course, or any intro security cert or IT cert, whatever, these fundamentals lacking, you're going to be lost within 10 minutes, because there's going to be terminologies like packets and routing and things like that that's thrown around that you're not going to understand what they are without having this context. Now, what we're doing here is it's building the web service, and it says it's done. So now what that means is on this machine, I can open a browser, for example. Let's go and turn off the secure piece here for the browser. Enhanced security for it. We're going to turn that off just so we can use it to browse right now. All right. So what we have is an actual website here. That's a default site. And what the default website is it's just a little IIS start page. Right? It just looks like that. I'm going to change that to say welcome, Cybersecurity Foundations first class, because that's what you all are. It's going to make a simple text file to do that. Open it, and I'm just going to say in there, still getting used to this little tiny keyboard. Right, so that's going to be our web page. Going to save it in the same directory. I'm going to save it as all files, and I'm just going to give it the name index. This is a Windows thing. Index.html, and what that means is that will be the default page that's served out. All right, now a word about the networking. When you build a server in AWS or Amazon, this what happens is it automatically creates a firewall at the host level and at the network level that only allows certain traffic in. And right now, the only thing allowed into this VM is RDP traffic, which is how we connect it to it. I want to allow you to browse to port 80 and port 443 on this, so I have to go poke a hole in that firewall to allow that. And in AWS, that's called a security group, okay? So right now, everybody go ahead and try to browse to that IP address that I put in chat. So go ahead and try to browse to it and let me know what you get when you try to browse to that IP. And what I mean by that is I'm just going to do it too. All right, I'm going to grab the IP out of chat that I posted. I'm going to put it into my browser. So when I say browse to it, I mean go to your browser and in the address bar, put that IP address in there like that and try to go to it. And what you should get is a timeout or page cannot be displayed. So I'm going to let you all verify that for me, that you get the same thing. Now, one of the things I'm excited about with the cloud course is what I'm showing you right now. Like when we get to that part a few weeks out, I'm going to have you build exactly what I'm building right now. And we're going to do a little bit more to it with it to make it more exciting. So the reason you can't get to it is because of that firewall problem I told you about. So let's go look at that instance. We can see it right there. And if I go to security, it tells me the security group is this one right here. So I click on that security group. I look at the rules that are associated with it. It says, hey, the only rule is this thing's allowing RDP inbound on port 3389. So for you to browse that website, I need it to allow 80 and 443 in. So I'm going to edit inbound rules. I'm going to add a rule. I'm going to do HTTP, or I could just put the port. I'm going to say from anywhere. And then I'm going to also do HTTPS in case I build a secure site there. I'm going to say from anywhere. And I'm going to save that rule. Okay. Now that I've saved that rule, go ahead and put that IP address back in your browser again and try to browse to it and tell me what you get now. And let me know when you're able to reach the site. All right. So now you can all get there. So think about that. In a matter of just 5 minutes, we built a server, built a web service on top of it, right? Now we put some content on there and made it available to the world just that fast. So even though we don't want HTTP, can you explain why we need to allow it so HTTPS works? No, there's no reason. I just did it to make it quick and easy. I mean, I didn't want to bother going and setting up a certificate and all that confusing. Remember, we're still dealing with beginner here. So I'm not trying to get into SSL certificates and how they work and how you have to do it. That is part of the problem is people fire hose people with too much advanced information as they come into the industry and then they're completely lost. So we're not even going to touch the word SSL until we understand foundations, which is, in other words, how the basics work. And then we'll start talking about trying to wrap security around it. All right. So now we've built that entire site. We could put a database behind it. And get this, the thing about cloud services is you could do it transparently of any of these things. I could literally go and say, I want a website that has a list of all my contacts on it that people can reach out to and grab and call from the website. There are services in here that will automatically build the VM that we just built manually, will automatically set up the database, automatically set up the page for you. You just literally fill out a little form of what you want it to do and say submit. And everything that we just did manually, AWS or Azure or Google Cloud will do that for you. That is the power of cloud services. Right? And that's what you get with it and why it's a thing that everybody's moving forward to. Okay. Any questions about that part so far? Everybody good? All right. So that's been about an hour. What's the no? All right, it's been about an hour, so let's take another 10 minutes. It's 1:35 Eastern time now. Let's come back at about 1:45, and we will pick up and do some more exercises together. We'll do some more hands-on stuff together. All right, we are back now, and everybody should be starting to get a feel for uh, where we're headed with this. And today's really about introduction and getting you up to speed. So let me point you all to the Foundations actual course that I would like for you all to watch. Go through all 4 hours and 50 minutes of it. Um, Between now and when we do this again, because I'm going to do this in about a month. So around this time in March, we're going to do the same 4 hours, and we're going to build on to some of the, we're still going to be doing foundational stuff, but we're going to add to what you've been doing here. And if you watch this course, you'll have some familiarity with what we'll be going into, but we'll just go in, much more in depth with it. For example, the cloud stuff that I just showed you, it's basically like kind of like what we did here. But when you actually do it, I'm going to have you do the things that I just did, and we're going to actually build some services and things like that out with it. Before we ever get into things like, introduction to pen testing, introduction to forensics, to again give you that foundational skill set that's to where if you do take a forensics course or a pen testing course, you can hit the ground running and you're not lost the first day as soon as you get in there. Like you can actually follow along. So this course right here, since you all now have a skills account, take this course, go through it in its entirety if you haven't already. Make sure I got the right one. Yep, that's it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a few questions now, and what I'm going to do is open this up to so that you can interact with me, right? So I can hear you and you can hear me, and even see you if you want. I'm going to post a Zoom meeting invite in chat right now. Or actually, let me see. That way we can actually interact with each other. And this is more of the question and answer part that'll be going here. Or actually, let me see. That way we can actually interact. And if you need the meeting ID and all that, I'm putting that in there as well. There's the meeting ID and the passcode. So you can ask your questions right here in chat in YouTube, or you can join the Zoom meeting and you can talk to me live in the Zoom meeting. Now I'm going to keep the stream going because I do want this all